Facts patriarchists don't want you to know. Episode 3: The Primary Lie of Patriarchies. Prior to learning that males play a biological role in pregnancy, father was merely a title of respect. In other words, for most of humanity's existence, humans had no idea that heterosexual intercourse caused pregnancy, because there was just too much time and too many other magical events that happened between one episode of coitus and birth. Most tribal people had explanations for why some women got pregnant, and rarely did those beliefs have to do with sexual contact. A fun fact is that not only do most of the terms for priests in the Catholic Church mean father, but the term pope does too. Highly ironic for a religion that does not allow their priests to marry, not to mention have biological children. Have you ever wondered why the Catholic Church has so many fathers but no mothers, other than Mary, the Mother of God? When males learn that they play a physical role in pregnancy, circa 2400 BCE, do see my other videos for the proof, they decided they were the ones who were the creators. So they sought to replace women who had long been believed to be the creators, bringing forth new lives through the power of their own physical bodies and spiritual magical abilities. Women were tied to the cosmos because of our moon time, when we bleed but don't die from that bleeding 3 to 5 days a month. Evidence for our ancestors of our cosmic battle to bring life from another realm to this realm. What followed when procreation was discovered was an active suppression of women's rights and knowledge of the power of the feminine. Males had to make themselves more spiritually powerful, transcendent, a word they still like to use, than women. So the lie that men are more powerful than women in every way began, later enforced by the Abrahamic religions. Thus, for every Abrahamic religion, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, only men can hold the top positions of power. Mothers were our ancestors' primary known blood predecessors. Our mothers' brothers and sisters, and the nieces and nephews born to those aunts, were our only known blood relatives. Imagine growing up in a culture where women are the primary decision makers. They own the land, they own the houses each extended family lives in. Most of these houses are run by a matriarch who makes all the primary decisions for the extended family. Her daughters generally either live in her house with her or in nearby houses of their own. Her sons join bachelor quarters when they get old enough, and every uncle is responsible for training his nephews, while every auntie trains the nieces. Most communities were run by the elected officials selected by the clan mothers. Most family titles, like sister, brother, aunt, uncle, and grandmother, grandfather, are general names given to people depending on their blood relation to the matriarch and to the child in question. But such respect titles, especially aunt and uncle, can be used at any time for a younger person to show respect to an older person. Who a child's biological father is does not matter. Only her, his, chiz mother is important. Her nation defines the child's national identity. There's much evidence for matriarchal history. There are still many such matriarchy-heavy cultures around the world today, from the Hopi of the Americas to the Mozuo or Nachi of China. In fact, when Homer's epic poem, the Iliad, was first written down circa 750 BCE, patriarchal ideas were relatively new among the ancient Greeks. Prior to 1250 BCE, when the siege of Troy supposedly occurred, the Mycenaeans, the pre Greek civilization that Homer claims were patriarchs in his tale, were actually still matriarchy heavy. Scholars have known this fact since the 1950s. Another fact is that when Genesis of the Judeo Christian Bible was first written, also circa 750 BCE, the ancient Judeans were also still matriarchy heavy and pantheistic. The people believed in a goddess, after all, Asherah. This religious view changed after the Judeans were held captive by the Babylonians, which led them to revise their Pentateuch into a pseudo monotheistic, male oriented religious text. The people refused to give up Asherah, though, which is why the Book of Ruth is an attempt to exchange the ancient matriarchal inheritance system, what is called a Levite system, a way to admit it was matriarchal without admitting it in so many words, for patriarchal inheritance. That's why the book ends with all the women of Judea praising Boaz for marrying Ruth, so that through her line, which has been grafted to his via land trade, the boy who would become King David could be born. The book ends like the middle of Genesis with a list of begats, naming the fathers, not the mothers, of David's line, thus seeming to complete the Jewish transition to a patriarchal system. However, it is still a Jewish tradition that a person is only really Jewish if their mother was Jewish. This matriarchal concept that a child follows the nature of her, his, chiz mother will appear again and again throughout human history, especially when it is useful to those in power, such as when children born to enslaved women raped by their owners are legally unable to claim inheritance status through patriarchal lineage, but instead follow the condition of their mother. To overcome the natural social state of matriarchy, early patriarchists, like the Judeans, had to first convince the women to allow it. And the Book of Ruth is exactly the evidence that shows how they did it. Just as Ruth was loyal to Naomi, her mother in law, to whom she legally had no remaining allegiance after her husband, Naomi's son, died, Jewish women were expected to embrace patriarchal ideas the same way Ruth then embraces Boaz. Because, the story implies, when women give their property and their bodies over to men's governance, powerful kingdoms are born. By this time in human history, which is often called the Iron Age, humanity has known or suspected for 1650 years, give or take, that males have a role in pregnancy. This discovery of procreation was unsettling for most people, evidenced by the Greek Dark Age and the fact that it takes this long for the primary patriarchal religion that still exists today, Judaism, to arise and is what often is called the Fertile Crescent. That time period, circa 750 BCE, becomes the turning point for many cultures around the eastern end of the Mediterranean. Because the people only passively believed in the patriarchal lie that I call the male myth, by this time the poets are chanting epics that remind people over and over that it is the male line that is most legitimate, which is a problem in this region because in places like Mesopotamia, Hattusha, and Egypt, royalty was recognized only through the female line. How does a male then maintain his role as primary leader of a city or a country? He marries a royal woman, even if she is his sister or even his daughter. So, while it would be nice to believe that this inbreeding, which has had dire effects on genetics and descendant health, ended by the final years of the Iron Age, in Europe, we know, it extended well into the medieval period, and in some places, into the late 19th century. While we know that the ancients allowed incest, even encouraged it in some instances, the fact that it occurred for so long is not the primary lie of patriarchal cultures, although it does reveal a primary desire of many patriarchists: control over every woman's body. The primary lie is the belief that is embedded within the patriarchal system itself. The idea that males are superior to females in every way possible, therefore, only males deserve to rule. Yet, in the last 100 years alone, women have disproven this lie repeatedly. Many women not only outperform men in school, but also become faster, stronger, more flexible, more resilient, and more capable than most men of the previous century ever thought possible. In many ways, well trained women outperform well trained men every day. In fact, if women had to masturbate the same way women do, we would have had just as strong upper body strength as men have enjoyed in the last previous 2,000 years, all along. In short, women can do everything men do, plus two: menstruate and give birth. In short, oppression is the only way men can transcend women. So, while the Iron Age cultures are still trying to convince women that men should run everything, the lie steadily grew that males are superior at everything, so that increasing numbers of cultures limited women's access to education, to stimulating physical activities that would build strength, agility, and speed, and to economic and political spheres, thus limiting women's independence and suppressing their voices. Both historical industrial revolutions, the first one in the Bronze Age, the second in the beginning of the early modern era, saw men taking over women's traditional jobs, just as the technology for those jobs became a step better. For instance, during the Bronze Age, women were the primary potters and home builders. Both technologies required the knowledge and use of clays, because both pots and bricks were made of clay. Once a woman figured out that a spinning platter could help her make pots more quickly and efficiently, men became interested in manufacturing and selling clay pots, especially large ones like amphoras, which would also bolster trade, since everything from wine to olive oil could be stored and shipped in those pots. Pots especially designed to fit in the holds of wagons and ships. But note, without the invention of the pottery wheel, the cart would not have been invented during the Bronze Age. Similarly, molds began being used to make bricks, which made the process of bricklaying faster and more efficient, which made the constructions of homes and other buildings faster. We know that women were the primary architects of palatial buildings in Sumeria because we have a king's note about the abduction of several hundred women solely for the purpose of building him a grand palace. How much credit should women be given for the invention of writing? In the Bronze Age, not only were men taking over women's tasks in order to optimize the sale of the goods women produced, but also taking over the spirit realm. Literature and archaeology both verify that male gods began usurping female ones. In Sumeria, Enlil and Enki not only replaced their mother, but Marduk actually kills her, using her body parts to create the world. Both Zeus and Apollo, originally female gods according to the Linear B tablets, fight an epic battle with their predecessors, the Titans. More dramatically, For the Aztecs, Coyolxauhqui kills her mother, Earth Mother goddess, Coatlicue, and from her emerges the new war god, Huitzilopochtli, whose temple replaces his mother's at the top of Templo Mayor. Similarly, in the Victorian Industrial Revolution, work that women did in their homes, spinning, weaving, sewing, and household pottery making, became industrialized. Ironically, employing women and children to do most of the dangerous factory work that created cloth, clothing, and ceramics. Men owned the machines and paid the women and children next to nothing for working from daylight to sundown and sometimes longer. In both the Bronze Age and the Victorian era, technologies were stolen from women to make men rich through mass production, shipping, and sales. Naturally, when women are denied basic rights like an education or a living wage, they become trapped in an economic system not built to benefit them. This entrapment fostered the male myth. After all, how could women compete with men when they were not allowed to know or to do as much? Women's abilities, though, defy the lie. Women themselves have repeatedly demonstrated the lie the male myth is, with women learning science and mathematics despite prohibitions against such education, continually being denied publication or the ability to give lectures on their subject matter, while opportunistic men take credit for their work. Just Google female scientists cheated out of their discoveries to see the many, many lists of women who were never given credit in their time for their scientific achievements. Furthermore, when women were finally allowed to compete in foot racing in 1922, the fastest woman in the world was a mere 2.5 seconds slower than the fastest male. And that was after 2,000 years of oppression. Now, women weightlifters can typically lift nearly 3 times their own body weight, while men struggle to lift twice theirs. Pound for pound, women are stronger. So, the male myth is the longest running lie that patriarchies have been telling us now for about 4,000 years. If merely having external and more vulnerable reproductive organs does not make men superior to women, as always, there is so much more still to reveal. The next episode is the current attempt to reinstate patriarchies. In the meantime, be certain to read Ruth J. Heflin's Pitiless Bronze, a post patriarchal examination of pre patriarchal cultures. You'll be amazed. Please like, share, and subscribe so everyone can learn the real truth.